Hi, my name is David, and I want to make a card game. In the last video, I went over the 4 words that describe the core ideas behind the game that I want to make, but let's see how to play the game. Keep in mind that this is the current rules for the game, which have undergone some changes since I very first made them, and are likely to have some changes moving forward. I'm pretty happy with how everything is moving right now, so any future changes are likely to be fairly minor, but things might be different. So, to start things off, both players shuffle up their decks and draw 5 cards to make their opening hand. Any number of cards can be put onto the bottom of the deck and then draw that many back, then shuffle your deck if you'd like to take a mulligan. From there, we just get to start setting up the board. This game is played on a 7x7 grid. To start, place one of the bases in the exact middle of the board, rotated vertically, to show that no player controls it. There's 7 bases in total. Each player is expected to bring 3 of their own, and then the neutral base, so 4 each, I guess. So none of the bases have any effects on them yet. That may change in the future, though. Then, after that, starting with the player who will act first, they place their first base, the home base, in any space in the row closest to them. So, on the 7x7 grid, you get to place it in any of these 7 rows, any of the 7 columns in your closest row. That's your home row, where your home base goes. Then the other player gets to do the same, based on the positioning of where the first player placed their base. Then the first player places their second base, their central base, in any space except for the middle row on the second, or middle column on the second row. So you got the home base, then you've got the central base, but you can't place it directly in the middle. Then the second player does the same thing with theirs, based on where the first player placed theirs. Then the first player does the same thing with their third base, their forward base, on the third row. Again, cannot be in the middle, just so that it can't line up straight with the uncontested neutral base. Then after that, the first player takes their leader and their lieutenant card, which we'll go over later, and places them adjacent to their home base, and then the other player does the same. Each deck starts with a leader that is kind of like the central build-around for your deck, which has your alien faction that you are representing and that you are commanding on the battlefield, and then a lieutenant is any 2-cost unit in that same leader's faction. Right. So in future videos, we'll go over some cards and we'll see how this looks a little more explicitly. But leaders are powerful units that are influence the battlefield right away, and the lieutenants are there to be able to have a little bit more control over the battlefield, so you don't just have the one guy on the field. But those start next to your home base at the very back row. Next, players take any one card from their hand and place it face down underneath any of the bases that they control. This is any of their 3 bases that they just placed. This is their resources, or mana, that they can use to play cards from their hand. Then the first turn of the game begins. So once we've done the base thing and we set up the leaders and the lieutenants, the game's good to go. You take one of the cards, you place it down, that's your 1 mana. Then we get to the first turn of the game. So in the very first turn of the game, both players draw a card from the top of their deck. Then both players can decide if they want to draw on an additional card or place the top card of their deck face down underneath one of their friendly bases as a resource. This happens every single time there is a new turn, right? Like we talked about in the previous video, there's a shared turn system. So both players are going to take their turn at the same time, passing the action back and forth until they both are done, and then you go to the next turn where you always draw 1, and then you can draw a second card or take that top card without looking at it and place it down as more mana. But each base can only hold 3 resources at a time. So if you want to have more than 3 mana, you have to divvy out your resources to different bases. This will come into play a little bit more when your bases start being taken, but we'll get over to that later in this video with the rules. So from here, the game starts being played with players taking actions going back and forth until they both want to pass the turn. When both players pass, then you go to the next turn, you resource the top or draw another card, and then priority passes from whoever it started with on the previous turn, and then you just go back into it. On a player's turn, they can take one of 4 actions. They can play a card from their hand, attack with their units, move their units, or pass. Notably, you can pass back to your opponent, and then they can take any action, and then you can jump back into it. The turn only ends when both players pass. Notably, each player can only do 1 attack action and only 1 move action per turn. These are your limited resources, on top of mana, kind of, which we'll get into in a minute. In order to get these resources back, the turn has to change over. Once both players pass and the turn changes over, then both players get their attack and their move back. So let's go over those one at a time. So first, when playing the cards, you must have at least the number of resources in the cost of the card. The cost is in the top left of the card, and this game uses a threshold mana system, unlike most other card games. So if you have 2 resources, you can play as many 2-drops as you can from your hand, right? Now, every time you play a card from your hand, action passes back to your opponent, and if they have nothing to do, then they'll pass back to you, and then you can keep playing more cards. When playing cards, you may notice that there is a secondary number underneath the cost of the card. The normal cost of the card is in the green box, and this is how much resources you have to have in order to play the card from your hand. Again, with the threshold mana system, you're not losing or spending any of this mana. You just have to have this much in order to play the card. Then, some cards will have a blue number box underneath them, and the number in that blue box is the pitch cost for the card. For those of you who have played Riftbound, this may seem familiar. When you play that card, you must take one of the resources underneath one of your bases and put it on the bottom of your deck. These cards are especially powerful and can especially swing the course of the game, and so in order to play them, you have to get rid of one of your resources in order to put them on the board. Again, this is still a threshold mana system, so if you play a 5-cost 1 pitch, then you can still play 4-cost cards for the rest of your turn. But managing when you play your powerful cards that take your pitch and put it on the bottom of your deck is key to kind of managing these more impactful cards in the game. When you're playing an event card, you just play it, and the card resolves its effect, and then it goes to the discard pile or the graveyard, and then that's your action for the turn. Pass it back to your opponent. When you're playing a unit card, you must place them onto a friendly base that has no units on it right now. Units cannot occupy the same space as any other unit, so even if you have 4 2-cost units in your hand, if you play one to each of your bases, you're then going to have to move them off before you can play some more, which, again, takes another action. When you give that move action, you can move any number of units 1 space adjacent. Diagonal is not adjacent in this game, it's only up, down, left, or right. And you can move them in any order. You don't have to move all of them, but you can move them all, and you can move them in the order that you want. So you can move them out of the way for another guy to move in their space. If 2 units are adjacent to each other and you want them to swap, they can do that, but that takes the movement from each of them. That happens at the same time. The primary reason for moving your units is to get them in range to either attack your opponent's units or their bases. So when you give the attack action, you can attack with any of your units to a target that is in range. Each unit has a range indicator on the card, and range is always drawn in a straight line. It can be straight up and down or left and right. Once you've selected your target for the unit's attack, you then assign damage to that unit based on the attack of your unit. If your unit is in range of their unit, then they also get to assign damage back to you. Once both players have assigned their damage, the damage is dealt, and this damage stays on those units until the end of the turn. If any unit has taken damage equal to or greater than its health, it is destroyed and put to the discard. If the units live, they're still alive, but that damage is marked on them, like we said, until the end of the turn. At the end of the turn, all damage is removed, so you shouldn't have to keep track of this between turns, which is the goal. Also, on the attack action, units can capture bases if a few requirements are met. So first, the unit must be adjacent to the base, no matter how much range the unit has. You can't range capture a base, you have to be next to it. Next, the base has to not be friendly. You can't capture your own base to trigger any effects or anything like that. And if there are no units controlled by the controller of the base adjacent to the base. If the enemy has a base and there are their units adjacent to the base, those units are defending the base. If it's the uncontested neutral base, nobody's defending that, it's uncontested, so you can take that no matter what. When a player captures a base, they rotate that base so that they can read it to show that they have captured it. Then, if that base had any of the opponent's resources underneath it, those cards are all returned to the opponent's hand. Then that player can choose up to that many cards in their hand that were just returned to their hand and place them face down underneath other friendly bases that they control, keeping in mind that each base has a maximum of 3 resources it can hold. This creates an interesting kind of push and pull, where you can take your resources from the top of the deck that, again, you don't look at when you place them face down under your bases, and you can place them on more front-forward, harder to defend, easier to lose bases, and then if your opponent does take them, you can get those cards back to your hand to try to sculpt your hand a little bit. If you get too aggressive with your mana and your resources being placed underneath bases, you might not be able to redeploy those resources underneath other bases, but most of the time, this shouldn't really be an issue. I found through testing that if you are just completely denying them resources, it was way too much of a backbreaking swing, because you're not only taking their base, which is closer to winning the game, but now you can deploy to that friendly base, so you take a lot of tempo on the board as well. So being able to redeploy those resources is pretty important for keeping the game balanced, but it can allow players to resculpt their hand to try to maybe tuck some of the more expensive cards underneath their other bases, or try to just get different cards, get more removal spells, get more synergy pieces, get more attack options into their hand to try to be able to beat back the opponent who just took one of their own bases. So then the fourth action is passing. If both players pass, then the turn ends. All units are healed of any damage on them, and turn priority passes to the other player. Turn priority is just who starts the turn. So at the beginning of the game, this is whoever wins the die roll, or the rock, paper, scissors, or whatever, and then this just gets passed back and forth only when the turns change. It doesn't matter who had the action, or who did the last thing when the turn ends. The priority just gets passed back and forth no matter what. This is the most subject to change rule. There's been a couple potentially degenerate scenarios with this. They haven't been like the worst thing in the world, but they're definitely something that I'm keeping an eye on, is this priority passing system. But then at the beginning of the turn, both players draw a card from their deck, and they can choose to take the top card of their deck, place it face down as another resource, or draw another card, and then they go back into play. This goes back and forth until the very beginning of the turn, one player controls 5 of the 7 bases, then that player wins. And that's the game. Clearly, resolving combat and capturing bases is the most complicated part of the game, and I'm working to try to make it simpler if that's at all possible, but I really like the spot that the game is in for right now. Everyone that I've been running playtests with has been able to pick up on the game very quickly. Granted, most of them have been already played other card games. I'm testing at my local game store, so a lot of these guys are Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh players that I'm just hanging out with between rounds or after the event, or maybe before the event if we're all there really early. Let me know what you guys think of the game in the comments below, what sounded the coolest, and what parts do you guys think still need some work. Next time I'll go over how card text work in the game, like we've seen a couple examples up here, since it's not how it's done in most TCGs and it might be a little confusing. Again, a huge shout out to the Distraction Makers channel and their Discord for hosting monthly playtest nights for game designers just like me who are trying to get their foot in the door, and I'll see you guys there for some playtests of the game. Peace.